Welcome to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck, where we talk to you about all things fantasy, keeper league, redraft, and dynasty. We're going to give you hot players to pick up, prospects on the rise, sleepers you should or shouldn't think of acquiring, and prospects who are looking to break out at the NHL level. I'm your host, Caleb Kearney.
And I am Jake Struzik.
Today, we're going to look at players to acquire if you are retooling your team. So with that, we're going to kind of give you a bit of a breakdown as to the types of players that you should look at if you are retooling. Jacob, what kind of players are you looking at for a retooling team?
Yeah, if you're retooling, you really want to try and focus in on the 25 and under players, those guys that are either slightly broken into the NHL or about to break into the NHL and start producing for you. Because if you're in your dynasty league, these are the guys that are going to kind of carry you into the future and put you over the hump into a playoff spot or into a deeper playoff position for the following year. And if you're trying to get, over that slump, finding those players that are over 30, they usually either are starting their decline or they're just ingrained in their prime. You probably won't be able to pick them up or get them from other people. Those are the kinds of players you're going to trade for these ones instead. So you're looking for youth, you're looking for breakout potential, you're looking for scoring potential, you're looking for coverage, whether it be physical players or goaltenders that have the chance to actually get a starting role within the next 1, maybe 2 years. So it's really the youth that isn't, super young, but it's the players that are going to be ready to play for you and start scoring for you within that next year or two.
100%. And for me, there's sort of two, pardon me, there's two sort of categories of players that I kind of look at. One, kind of like you were saying, you want players that are under 25, okay? And part of that is, based on a lot of statistical evidence, the prime years for a player are 25 to 28 years old, okay? That's why there's a lot of pressure in Edmonton right now, because their best players, Draisaitl, McDavid, are in that range, right? So they want to put all their chips in so they can win with these players that are in their prime. Now, you want to try to acquire players just before they're at that prime, right? So these are young stars. They're kind of established already. Maybe they haven't really been in the league super long, but there's enough of a track record production wise to give you confidence that you can put these players out. Generally, they have at least 200 NHL games played. So that's about 2.5 seasons. And with a decent combination of either good peripherals or lots of points, or a combination of the two. Maybe there's some peripherals where they're really good at, maybe they're really high shooters, or maybe they're not high shooters, but then the other peripherals are great and they still manage to get points. But you want them to be 25 or younger so that there is that potential to grow and that potential to get even more points and more peripherals. So that's the first sort of type that you want to look at. And then there's also players that are rising through the ranks, that are close to their breakout threshold. Now, just to touch on breakout threshold quickly here, there are some articles that you can look at. Dauber has some articles out about breakout threshold. There's somebody who kind of looked into the data and the numbers for this. So a breakout threshold is the first time that a player produces points at a 25% increase from their previous year. And then they do this for a couple more years. And then they still increase in points, generally speaking, after that. But this is like the first time they really start taking big leaps in their point production. Okay. And this breakout threshold, it kind of has like an 80-20 rule. So 80% of players generally follow this. Generally, obviously, it's not a science, but it's an approximation that can be a good measuring stick for you. 80% of players kind of fall into this, and 20% of players are exceptions, whether it's they just completely fall off the map and they don't ever produce, or they jump into the league right away and they just produce regardless of who they are. Okay. And the breakout threshold can be broken down further into the size of player. Okay. Now, if the player is of an average size, so the average size being between 5'10" and 6'2", 171 pounds, 214 pounds, the breakout threshold is 200 games played. Okay. Exceptionally sized, which is bigger than that range that I said, or smaller than that range, they generally hit it at 400 games played. Okay. Because everything that's going on in their head and the skills that they know they have, it needs to catch up to their body, which is still growing, right? When you're that big, you probably had some kind of big growth spurt, and your skills just need to catch up to your body. Okay. So that's the big thing about breakout threshold. So to target players that are at that threshold or about to reach that threshold can be a good strategy, as long as you also have a mix of players who are more established. Okay. And then on top of that, there are also, we can add a third category of prospects who are ready, who are NHL ready, but they haven't played many NHL games. Maybe they haven't played any yet. But those are players you want because they're just like, why not? Why not acquire them? Take a chance on them. Sure, there's the unknown of like, are they actually going to produce? But history tends to repeat itself, and people who have a certain level of production before they get to the NHL tend to produce a certain way once they're in the NHL. So my first guy that I want to talk about as a sort of young star is Evan Bouchard. Now, points-wise, he's a little lower this year than he was last year. You know, in 73 games played this year, he only has 4 goals. He had 12 goals last year, okay? So 27 assists. So he still got 31 points in 73 games, which isn't terrible. And he still has 9 more games to get that total up, try and hit 40. 40 would be a nice mark for him to hit. 143 shots, 87 hits, 65 blocks. That's all good peripherals. That's all like over 2 shots, over a hit, about a block. That's good. The thing with Bouchard this year, his shooting percentage is 2.8%. His career shooting percentage is 4.8%. So he is shooting he's not getting the luck that he's kind of gotten over his career. So an opportunity here maybe to buy low on a guy who there's no Tyson Barrie in Edmonton anymore. His only competition are guys who are also just good two-way guys who also contribute in other ways and contribute 5-on-5 a lot more historically. I mean, with the exception of sort of Nurse. Nurse ran Edmonton's power play a couple years ago, had a really great year. Jacob, what do you think of this Bouchard guy?
Yeah, Bouchard's always been a solid, just overall fantasy option. I've picked him up a couple of times throughout the past couple of years because he has those kind of mini streaks where he really is picking up the points like you would expect him to as a more offensively inclined defenseman. So the fact that he will get you shots, he'll get you at least to hit a game. He does have the potential to put up points. The more ice time he gets, it'll be, kind of a similar situation to how when Sandin showed up in Washington in the absence of John Carlson. The more role that Bouchard gets given, the more chances he's going to get. He's not going to be the number 1 D because Nurse is still in town, but he's still going to be given good enough opportunities that he's going to have plenty of fantasy value. And above anything else, you can't go wrong with getting goals and assists from the back end. It's just an absolute boost no matter what type of league you're in. So Bouchard has some incredible breakout potential. He's just kind of, like you said, he's not getting the puck luck.
Yeah, he's got 175 games played under his belt right now. So that is just below that sort of breakout threshold. I think he's like 6'1" or 6'2". So he's in that average sized breakout threshold. You know, if we were to look at his career shooting percentage applied to the shots that he has had this year, he should have like 7 goals instead of 4. Okay. So a little bit of a bump there. You know, but again, anybody who's playing with McDavid and Draisaitl on the power play, you want to at least keep tabs on those players. Okay. And Jacob, who's another player who we should keep tabs on to add to a retooling team?
Probably one of the better and more underrated names I'm going to throw out here. The Arizona Coyotes, Clayton Keller.
Yeah.
He has been an absolute dynamo this season, but just for the past couple of years, he's been just progressively getting better. His rookie season, that was back in 2017-18. He had a short stint with the Coyotes in 16-17, but it was only 3 games. So his first full season was 17-18. He had 23 goals, 65 points. He dropped off a little bit the following year, but, you know, Arizona has just been trying to be bad almost the way that they've been organizing everything. But he had 47 points, and the next year he had 44 points. Next year he had 35 points, but that was in the shortened season, so he would have been looking at over 50 points that year. The following year, which would have been last year, he had 63 points, and that was in 67 games. And in this year, he's got 79 points in 73 games, and he's going to be pushing 40 goals by the end of the year. He's on pace to hit just under 90 points. So as he continues to progress and get better, he's still only 24 years old. He'll be 25 this year. So he's the kind of player that is at the top end of the age range, but he's still someone that's on a not very good team that you can pick him up or grab him from other people for a cheaper price. And he's someone that's still going to keep putting up points, especially as Arizona continues to become a better team. He's going to be getting better line mates. You're going to have players like Cooley, Gunther. You're going to have so many young prospects that are coming up with him, and he's going to be the guy mentoring them. So a player that has the work ethic, that puts up points, that does pretty much everything for a team, he's going to be one of the future high-end and just overall point producers for that team. You can't go wrong with having some team's best player on your roster. No matter how bad that team is, if you have a top player from that team, you're going to be riding smooth into your coming years. And Keller is somebody that will absolutely put you over the hump if you're retooling, because he's not going to cost you a pretty penny, but he's still going to produce at a similar or even better rate than some of these, you know, mid-tier to slightly higher tier 24, 25, 26-year-olds.
100%. Clayton Keller. Here's the thing about players on bad teams. Okay. Do not avoid the best players on bad teams, because even bad teams need to put players on the ice. And if you can grab the top player on a bad team, it's not going to hurt you at all. It's going to benefit you more than anything else. And to just stick with the Coyotes here, one guy who I picked up last year in one of my leagues, and he's been fantastic, and he's right at that breakout threshold for exceptionally sized players, is Lawson Crouse. Okay. He's 6'4", 215. So he's kind of in that bigger category, and he's 25 years old. Okay. This is perfect. He's just entering his prime and kind of hitting his breakout at the same time. Okay. He's got 414 games played. He had a nice year last year where a lot of people called it like his breakout year. But actually, you could consider this year his breakout year because he's further improving on his point production from last year. Last year, 65 games played, 20 goals, 14 assists for 34 points, so at 0.52 points per game. This year, 68 games played, 22 goals, 17 assists for 39 points. Okay, so he has more points. He's got a couple more games. But part of the reason why he didn't have as many games last year is he did get injured. I believe it was towards the end of the year last year, if I remember correctly. It was shortly after I acquired him. He got injured, which kind of pissed me off. Now, peripheral-wise, this year, 131 shots, 174 hits, 53 blocks, okay? The blocks is up from last year. The hits is a little down. And the shots, in 3 more games played, he has the same number of shots, okay? So the shots are still kind of there. His shooting percentage, 16.8% this year. Last year, he shot 15.3, okay? So in his career, he's got 11.7, okay? And if he keeps on this trajectory of in that 13 to 15 range, that's just going to bring his average shooting percentage up. He's getting the time on ice. He's getting just a hair under 18 minutes per game this year. He's getting some power play time. It's obvious that the Coyotes aren't trying to win, because if they were, they'd be playing this guy more. So once they get those prospects coming up in a year or two, maybe, we can see his ice time really sort of ramp up once they have the elite talent that teams need to start pushing to get into the playoffs. And Crouse is one of those guys. He's going to get you coverage all over the board. He's probably going to finish, with they have 14 games played for the rest of the year about. So if he gets even 7 more points, that's great. He's going to be in the 40s. Next year, you could look for him to be in the 50s or even in the 60s, potentially. So great guy there. Jacob, who's your next guy?
Here, we're going to dip and stay towards the west. I'm going to talk about the Anaheim Ducks forward Trevor Zegras. Zegras is just overall one of the most exciting players in the league to watch. That's just without a doubt the way he plays and the style that, he does everything. But at the end of the day, it's another player on the bad team. He is on the Ducks, and they have just been atrocious defensively and just overall this season. And Zegras has still found a way to be extremely consistent in that span of time. Last year, he had 61 points, 75 games, 23 goals, 38 assists. He's got about the same thing going now. It's in 73 games. He's got 22 goals and 37 assists for 59 points. So his pacing is still remaining the same, despite the fact that his team got worse from one year to the next. So in my opinion, that's more of a positive on him than it is a negative. So he's ultimately going to be one of the top 2 forwards and the top 2 centers on that team for 10 plus years. I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be that. His only real competition is maybe McTavish when he gets there, or if by some way the Ducks end up getting maybe Bedard or something in the draft, depending on how bad they finish or how the draft lottery plays out. But Zegras is still, no matter what, going to be a top-end forward in Anaheim. And within the next 1, maybe 2 years, as the Ducks try and trend their way back up the standings and out of the out of the basement, he is just going to be one of the most reliable options just based off his scoring consistency alone. He's not a super physical forward, but he's a playmaker who can score some really cool goals. Fantasy-wise, it's just about the end numbers and the score sheet. He does get a decent amount of shots, and he puts the puck in the back of the net. He's a pure offensive style forward. He's not really going to get you any defensive numbers. His plus minus is fairly atrocious at minus 24. He's, minus 21 last year. So he's looking at, almost minus 50 over the course of 2 years. It's not exactly a great defensive option, but he offsets that issue with his scoring. And his scoring is just going to progress since he's so young. He's only 21 years old. 22 years old. And he has all the right tools to be a top end center. And if you can get him now while the Ducks are basement dwellers, you're going to have a really nice high-end player going into your next couple of years as you retool and have this kind of young core in your redraft or your keeper leagues.
Absolutely. Yep. In some aspects, people might consider, what's kind of going on with him right now, a down year, but he's going to be, one of the top two centers for the Ducks, what Jacob was saying about everything. Just looking at his stats, he only has 2 less games played from last year, and he's only 2 points off of what he got last year. So you like to see that consistency. He has 173 games played, 172, pardon me. So he's right on that cusp of also that breakout threshold. So if he plays the rest of the season, he'll eclipse what he got last year, and he can only go up. He can only go up. So that's a fantastic choice. Another pick for me, who I think is really having a great breakout season this year, Tim Stutzle with the Ottawa Senators. Okay. He's 6 feet, 193 pounds. So he's in that average size. He has 201 games played right now. And I think his breakout is happening right now. So if you pick this guy up before now, you're laughing. 69 games this year, 35 goals, 46 assists for 81 points. Okay. Last year, he got 58 points in 79 games. He still has another 10 games to further build on the season he had last year. And last year was still fantastic. Okay. 199 shots this year, 101 hits, 46 blocks. He's got, looks like 25 power play points for this year. And he's playing almost 4 minutes on the power play. He's getting 21 minutes of ice time. This is a guy you want. He's only going to go up. What else can I say about this guy? This guy's fantastic. He's 21 years old. Okay. So to reach the breakout at this point, when he hits his prime, it's going to be nuts. This guy's fantastic. Jacob, who else you got that's looking fantastic?
Here's where I'm going to go into my homer pick again. I'm going to talk about Buffalo Sabres player Dylan Cozens. He is one of the best prime examples of what it looks like for positive, progression for a player. When he broke into the league, it was a few years ago, 2021. He played 41 games on Buffalo, kind of in and out of the lineup. He had 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points. It wasn't fantastic, but as you watched his game, you really saw that type of progression. So by the following year, 21-22, he played 79 games. He had 13 goals and 38 points. There was that positive progression for all of his overall statistics. And he was really, developing into that future top 6 forward, but he just looked kind of snake bitten. Fast forward to this season, and he really is having that proper breakout as he's been given that, second line role and filling in on the first line when Thompson has been out. He's got 71 games played to this point, 28 goals, 61 points, and he's on pace to finish the year with 32 goals and 70 points. So a player like that, you can't go wrong with. And what's great about Cozens is he plays both ends of the ice. He throws hits, he plays defensively, and he gets time at all points on the ice. PK, power play, 5-on-5. And right now he's been mostly carrying his line. He's been he spent most of his time with two rookies, Jack Quinn and JJ Peterka. And as he continues to develop chemistry with them, if they stay together, that's only increased point production all around for those three players. But Cozens himself is still producing, regardless of his two line mates not really producing nearly as much. So a player like that is really valuable fantasy-wise because it's that consistency that you want out of a young player. He still is not old in any way, shape, or form. He's 22 years old, and he's not going to be 23 until next year. He already turned 22. So he has just about 3 years of NHL experience. He knows what the league is like, and he is already producing. Excuse me. So picking up Cozens is not just a future investment. He's a win now type of player as well. So he's someone that, again, might not get the appropriate attention because he is on Buffalo and he's being overshadowed by players like Thompson, Tuck, Skinner, Dahlin. So he's kind of in the background as far as his scoring and his production has been. So Cozens just overall is someone, if you had him at the start of this year, you are just reaping every reward. And if you can grab him for maybe a mid to low round pick, because that's about what he would end up getting drafted at anyways, I would say grab him because by next year, he's going to have just an increase in his production comparatively, and he has the potential to be that 75 to 82 point player and someone who plays physically and defensively on top of that. You can't go wrong fantasy-wise.
100%. Cozens is having a fantastic year. A couple other players who are kind of established, who I'm just going to briefly touch on. Rasmus Dahlin, Jason Robertson. We touched on these guys last week. If you are a retooling team, these are guys you want to have. They're younger than 25. And, well, maybe Dahlin is 25. I don't have his age in front of me, but these guys
23.
Perfect. They're both young. They're both having great years. They're both shooting about what their career shooting percentage is, and they're getting great category coverage. Robertson has room to grow in terms of getting more hits and blocks, but he's got the goals, he's got the points. Dahlin's got the goals, the points, the shots, the hits, the blocks. Fantastic across the board. But I really want to talk about a guy who I think is going to break out in the next year or two. He's at 325 games played and just recently got traded to a team that I think is a great fit for him, that can really nurture him and bring out his game, and that's Jesse Puljujarvi. 66 games played this year, 5 goals, 9 assists for 14 points. That's nothing, I guess you could say. Really kind of been a down year for him. 107 shots, 123 hits, 24 blocks. He's got 4.7 shooting percentage this year, and his career shooting percentage is 8.3. Okay. So he should have more than 5 goals. He should have 10 goals. And then on top of that, the 9 assists, that's also nothing. Like, he should have more assists than that. So I think having him on a team like Carolina, where they emphasize the value of everybody, the value of playing 4 lines, that is really going to benefit him. Like his secondary assist percentage this year is 44.4%. So that could also go up just kind of naturally. And it's also a stat that you can't really predict as much as you can predict primary assists and shots. But I think having him with all those Finnish players in Carolina is a great fit for him. He falls under the exceptionally sized category. He's 6'4", 201 pounds, 24 years old. So even if he doesn't break out next year, I think the year after he could, but I definitely think that next year he will have a much better year than this year. Like even last year was a better year for him in terms of point production. He had 36 points in 65 games. So like more than double what he has now. He had 14 goals, 22 assists for 36 points, which is fantastic. He was also playing a lot more. He was playing like 16 minutes on average last year. He's like 12 and a half minutes this year. So not great for him, but Carolina is going to be a good place for him, I think. Jacob, you got a young star on the rise who people should think about if they're retooling?
Oh, I got a couple. One that I think everybody should pay attention to very, very, very much is Dallas Stars forward Wyatt Johnston. He was first round pick 2021. He's under 20 years old, and he's breaking into the NHL this year after a monster OHL season last year. Not with, record-breaking numbers, but with numbers that should make you pay attention, especially for a rookie. He's got 73 games played so far this year, 21 goals, 36 points, and any player who's under 20 or who's under 20 years old that's scoring 20 goals and pushing up to that 25 mark by the end of a season, you should absolutely be paying attention to them, because that means that their goal scoring talent translates from juniors to the NHL. And as they continue to progress that talent and actually develop it, especially on a team that's as offensively, inclined as the Stars can be, he is going to be a massive piece to their top six in the future. Their top six is getting a little bit older. Pavelski's up there in age. Sagan's up there in age. Ben's up there in age, but they still have the young players like Robertson, Hintz, and Johnston is going to be a fantastic complement to that top six. He plays center. He can also play wing. So he's an option at any point really in an offensive lineup. And goal scorers come at a premium at all times. So if you can get in on Johnston early, you're absolutely going to have a winner, because by next year, he's going to be pushing that 25, 30 goal mark. And then by the following season, don't be surprised to be seeing him push that 35 to almost 40 goal mark, especially as the older players kind of drop off and he gets more ice time and he gets more opportunity. He really is just a pure offensive player at heart right now, but that doesn't mean that he won't have more depth to his game as he progresses. He's still young. He's at a fairly average size. He's about 6'1", about 180 pounds. So he's not massive, but he's big enough that he can play a physical game if the Stars start, implementing that type of thing for a player like him. So he's very young. Grab him if you can. And if you are retooling, don't be afraid to start him either, because he is scoring at a fairly good rate currently as well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic choice. My next choice here, kind of more of a prospect. He doesn't have the same games played as Wyatt does, but on a team that is not doing great this year, and that's Kirill Marchenko. Okay, this guy, like we've said all year, guys who are getting goals, you want these players. And Marchenko, this year, he's got 19 goals in 49 games. Okay, he also has 3 assists. So in the future, that those assist numbers are going to go up 100%. He's not going to be below 10 assists every year for his entire career. That's just ludicrous. If that actually happens, like somebody who predicts that should buy a lottery ticket, because that's just crazy. 18.6 shooting percentage so far this year, which is definitely high. 102 shots. He's also got 31 hits, 35 blocks. So there's a lot of room to grow as far as peripherals go too. And in terms of his size, like he's 6'3", 187 pounds. So he's going to have a long summer to get stronger, put some weight on, get meaner in the corners, all that kind of stuff, meaner in front of the net. So he'll score goals. He's already showing it right now. And with him being 6'3", like there is the potential that it takes him longer to actually reach his breakout, but he might be in that 20% where, in 1 or 2 years, he's already like a 60, 70 point guy. If he had been up for the whole season up till now, he might be pushing 30 goals already and just have more assists. I think as far as the future goals, as far as the future goes, he's the guy you want. Jacob, you got another guy for us?
Yeah, I got one last really big one, really prominent one. It's a guy you might have heard of. As far as prospects go, he hasn't even been drafted yet. Some dude named Connor Bedard. He's kind of all right. Might have heard of him. Possible generational talent coming up in this next draft. Bedard is just the real deal. As soon as he breaks into the NHL, he might not be lighting up, every single night, but he's still going to be pushing probably 50, 60 points, and the dude is a goal scorer. So you can't complain about anything as far as point production will be concerned. It might vary slightly based off of what team he goes to, just, because the West plays slightly different than the East, and he might have a bit of a struggle based off physicality because he is a little bit smaller as far as forwards are concerned. He's 5'10", so he's at that, lower range as far as height goes. But he's shown that he has every type of ability from here till Sunday. In his year that he's currently having in the WHL, 57 games played, he's got 71 goals and 143 points. It's just ridiculous what he's been doing all year. So if you are in, whether it's a redraft league or it's a keeper league or a dynasty league, I'm not saying use your first pick on Bedard, but use maybe your third, fourth, fifth round pick on that player that you might be thinking, maybe they'll have good production for me. It'll be worth it to spend that pick on a young, dynamic player like Bedard because he's going to give you fairly good production, especially if he ends up playing for the Ducks or if he ends up playing for Columbus. They have the tools to put around him to help him produce almost immediately. So if Bedard is an option you have towards the earlier part of your draft, like I said, not necessarily your first or second round, because you still probably want to grab some established NHLers that are going to help you win as a retooler there. I'd say pick him up if he's still available in that fourth, fifth, sixth round range. I think it would just make more sense there for any team, but especially for a retooling team, because you're going to get production out of him almost immediately, and you're definitely going to get production down the line as he develops with high-end, young, skilled teammates.
Yeah, Bedard, you want Bedard. He's going to be fantastic. And to kind of put things into a little bit of perspective, as far as his production this year goes, there is a player in 2014-15 who played for the Erie Otters in the OHL who in 47 games had 44 goals and 76 assists for 120 points. And his name was Connor McDavid.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. He's literally in 73 games this year has 139 points. He will hit 2 points per game this year. No question. Zero doubt. It's happening. Okay. Pick up Bedard.
Yeah. Just grab him.
Maybe a strategy you could use is with your first round pick, if you're picking first overall, get McDavid. And honestly, well, if you're in a redraft, get McDavid.
Yeah.
And then with your next pick, why not just grab Bedard? Why not? What's the worst that could happen? My next prospect, who has only played 2 NHL games, that I'm going to talk about very quickly here, David Jiricek. In 45 games in the AHL this year, he's got 6 goals, 28 assists for 34 points. He's having fantastic production in the AHL for a under 20 aged player. You want this guy. He's going to produce for Columbus next year. The talk is that he's going to spend the entire year next year in the NHL. It was a very tough decision for them to cut him this year, but they wanted to give him the minutes and help him boost his confidence. And playing in the AHL isn't a slouch league either. So this kind of production is fantastic. Pick up Jiricek. We'll see if he makes it onto the power play and onto the top power play in Columbus. He's probably going to start on like the second power play. And as he proves himself, or as Werenski gets injured, which he does every year, you can cash in on all your shares of David Jiricek. And Jacob, we're just about at the end of our show here. So have you got a couple quick hits for guys, for the listeners to pick up?
Yeah, just a couple more on that, younger end that you're not going to go wrong picking up. One big one for me, Montreal Canadiens forward Cole Caufield. He's a pure goal scorer. He's very undersized, but he's shown this year that he has the goal scoring talent, and everything still translates to the NHL. And Montreal's only going to get better as, Suzuki grows, as Doc grows, as Slafkovsky grows. They have a great forward group there, and they're all young. So he's going to be a big pickup. Another good one, New Jersey Devils forward Dawson Mercer. He's young, but he's getting those top 6 minutes. He's shown that he can get hot, and when he gets hot, he's putting up a good amount of points. So a player like Mercer, absolutely somebody you want to grab. But those would be the two kind of forward ends. As far as goaltending goes, if you're looking young, you can't go wrong with Spencer Knight. He's, still away from the team at the moment, but he's still one of the younger goalies in the league. And he's shown that he has the capacity to be a starting goaltender at such a young age already. Another huge one, as far as, ready to break into the cusp, Peter Kochetkov for the Carolina Hurricanes. As Anderson gets older, Chekhov is going to have more of an opportunity to get those starts, especially considering the goaltending situation in Carolina. Both of their goaltenders have glass bones. Chekhov does not yet, so he's just going to keep having every opportunity to play, and the more minutes he grabs, the more wins he's going to get, because Carolina is just a straight-up good team.
Absolutely. And in that sort of same vein, I would say another great goaltender to pick up would be Lucas Stutzle for Anaheim. Anaheim's going to be great here, or start being good in a year or two. Their defense still needs a bit of work, but as Gibson ages out, Stutzle, he's really gonna do well. Even this year he's been doing pretty good in the time that he has. He is kind of the backup right now, and like this year so far, he's played 13 games. He's got 4 wins, which is whatever. But the numbers aren't fantastic because Anaheim isn't fantastic. But he's a guy who, if the team is in front of him is a lot better, he's going to be a fantastic guy to pick up. And also, I would be remiss if I did not mention my favorite goaltending prospect, Jesper Wallstedt, who's lighting up the AHL right now. He is going to be a guy who you want to pick up if you don't already. He's just, what can I say about Wallstedt that I haven't already? He plays sound. He is athletic when he needs to be. But the thing about Wallstedt is he has such good technical skill and skill staying square to the shooter, square to the puck. He isn't a little guy as well. He's 6'3", 214 pounds. Again, only 20 years old. But in 34 games this year, for the Iowa Wild, 2.69 goals against average, 910 save percentage. He's got a shutout. His record is 16, 13, and 5. Okay. And he went to the AHL All-Star game, just to kind of put everything into perspective for you here. So he is a guy to pick up. If I had to choose between Askarov, Kosa, and Wallstedt, I would pick Wallstedt, and I would say Wallstedt is closer to NHL action. So that is all the time that we have today to look at all these retooling players to pick up if you're retooling. Next week, we're going to talk about players to acquire if you're rebuilding. There's going to be some overlap. There's lots of good players, but be sure to listen next week to find out more about that. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at THW Fantasy. I'm on Twitter at Caleb Scouting.
And I'm also on Twitter at Stros67.
If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. If you are listening in podcast format, subscribe to the podcast and please leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to. You've been listening to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck. Keep your stick on the ice, get pucks in deep, and give it 110%, eh? I'll see you next week.